Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, welcome and thank you so much for joining me this evening on Talk and Sip this Saturday evening, 15th of the 4th, in the land of the, as they say, the land of the former colonizers or so, based on this very interesting topic. So, yes, all the way from the UK, United Kingdom. My name is Silburn Sidiel, the host of the Silburn Show and Talk and Sip special tonight. And one of the topic tonight is going to be a very interesting topic because, of course, as we know, Jamaica is on the roll, right? Fantastic on the roll, and tonight is going to be about Jamaica becoming a republic, and it's very interesting how this topic has come around because there's been the talk for Jamaica becoming a republic for years now. I understand from 1995, Jamaica, with the committee which was established years ago, and of course I'm going to be corrected along the way, but the Constitutional Reform Committee, 1995. But even before that, I mean, Jamaicans have been talking about him from 1962. Many people have said, we are not independent. How can we be independent and swear allegiance to the king or the former queen, if anything? And was 1962 the process of ultimate independence leading up to a republic state? And because this topic is so fresh off the mark now, and the minister Malahu Fort is now the government minister who has responsibility for that area, has set out the stage recently at a press conference, and I play clips of it. But before I go any further, at the same time, this is Talking Sip, ladies and gentlemen, and in Talking Sip we try to find a drink what you're drinking, and for me, I like to what can I say, drink some what should I say? I like to drink water. Actually, some sparkling water, and wherever you're from, you can tell me and post whatever you're drinking. And also, I like to have just a sip, just a little, just a little sip, if anything, just a little sip of wine. Especially when you got to go to church in the morning. So just a little sip, if anything, like that. And the whole concept is to sort of have a sort of laid back discussion, but at the same time, like in Jamaica, sometimes when they say when you go to the rum bar or you go to the wine bar or so, wine bar they say in the UK, people speak freely at that time, and therefore it's a concept that is about speaking freely. And the whole concept came from during the COVID period, whereby we were all locked in, and therefore it was a way of actually having these discussions from across the world, but from a diaspora perspective, and that is what it's about. But tonight, I'll have on my show tonight. I'll have Dr. Rose, not doctor. I keep calling her doctor. I keep saying doctor. It is Professor Rosalie Hamilton, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Rosalie Hamilton will be coming on tonight. And Professor Rosalie Hamilton is the chair of the Advocates Network Jamaica, founding director, Institute of Law and Economic. And later on, at the same time, I'm hoping to join with Dr. Kevin Brown, who is the UK North Representative, Global Jamaica Diaspora Council. He's going to join me at some point today as well, and we're going to have the discussion. And what I really want to do is to somewhat set the stage, set the stage as we lead towards being a republic, setting the stage. And I believe the best person is Miss Rosalie Hamilton, who is going to come in and set the stage. Mark Taylor said what he's going to have. He's having Earl Grey tea hot. Mark, Jamaica, living in Toronto. Good. Well, welcome. At least you have said what you have said. So we're going to have Earl Grey tea. And of course, it's cold in the UK, so I just have a glass of wine. And and I believe that the diaspora, it is so very important for the diaspora to somewhat grasp hold of this whole republic eventuality, you know, republic eventuality, and not a pipe dream, but something eventually to become a reality. I believe it's very important at this time that we take control of our destiny, take control of our future as much as possible. And we don't want somehow the monarch put Prince William and Prince Harry, or Prince Harry, to sort of change the mindset of the people. But now is the moment, and now is the time to move forward into this new era. And I think this new era is upon us. But one of the things I was looking at, and I was listening to Malahu Fort. She is the minister with responsibility, and I'm gonna play something what she said today, if I can find it. Yeah.
Extremely pleased to engage with the media this afternoon to provide an update to the people of Jamaica and to everyone else listening on the work of the historic Constitutional Reform Committee established to provide expert guidance and oversight to the government and people of Jamaica during the constitutional reform process that we are now in. The media are an important partner, media generally, in the work that we're doing. You are in the business of shaping opinion, you're in the business of informing the public, you're in the business of educating the public, not just entertaining, as some would say the media can do. And so we have taken note of the heightened interest in the media and in the public domain about the work of the Constitutional Reform Committee. We have taken note of the many issues that have arisen and on which discussions are taking place. We have taken note of some of the conclusions drawn based on either misunderstanding or inaccurate information. And it is my hope that at the end of this press conference, you would have more information and you'd be helping to keep the focus in the right direction as we embark on this historic mission of establishing the Republic of Jamaica.
So therefore, Malahu Fort has set the stage there, which means to say, before I go any further, can you hear me clearly? I just want to make sure that people can hear me very clearly. I can see a comment there to the extent that the volume need to go up. Let me know if that's the case, or you can hear me very clearly. Just give me a thumbs up there. Can you hear me clearly? Um, uh, yes, we can now. You can hear me very clearly. Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm going to bring in Dr. Kevin Brown briefly. Let me see if he's around. Yes, bring in Dr. Kevin Brown. Dr. Brown, how are you? You see, you having your your dinner?
Hi, good night, Silver, and good night to everyone who's joined
Yes,
in.
yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kevin Brown, he is the and let me get this right, UK North Representative, Global Jamaica Diaspora Council within the UK here, of course, UK, of course. Um, Kevin, before Doctor, she's gonna say, why do I keep calling her Doctor? But Professor Hamilton comes in. What's your take on where Jamaica is going in a nutshell, there, sir?
With respect to becoming a
Yes, yes.
republic, well, Jamaica has been on a very slow journey to becoming a republic. We received independence in
Mm,
1962, and it's now 2023, and we're still not a republic. So, in my opinion, Jamaica appears to have been on a reluctant journey to becoming a republic, which is really unfortunate because many other countries that were colonized have become republics because it's the right thing to do in terms of asserting your sovereignty. How could it be that having received independence from Britain in 1962, that you still retain the British monarchy as your
mm,
head of state? So as it stands today, King Charles, the King of the United
Mm.
Kingdom, um, is the head of state for Jamaica, represented by a governor general, right? And not only that, our final court of appeal
Yes.
is the Privy Council in London. So, how do Jamaicans define sovereignty and freedom?
Yes.
We clearly have a very strange way of defining freedom and sovereignty.
Yes.
And I think that we now need to get to the
Mm.
stage where for us freedom is an absolute.
Yes.
You know, it's like I often say to people, when someone is pregnant, you're not just a little bit pregnant, you are
Mm.
pregnant,
Mm.
right? And so free, and so it's the same with freedom. You're either free or you're not. You're
Mm.
either pregnant or you're not. You know, so we have to get to the stage where, as Jamaicans, we get comfortable with being free, and a free nation does not have a head of state who resides in a foreign country.
Is
And
yeah.
to make it,
Go on,
go on.
Kevin. Go on, Kevin.
And to make it worse, Silburn, your head of state resides in a country that Jamaicans cannot freely travel to. If you want to travel from Jamaica to Britain, you need to apply for a visa.
Yes.
The visa process is very evasive, meaning that they're going to ask you all sorts of questions that you and I would consider very
Mm.
personal. They're going to ask you about your financial history and all the rest of it. And so to come to this country where your head of state resides is very difficult. And so that in itself really, begs the question, why have we tolerated this situation for so
Mm.
long? What is stopping Jamaicans and more so our
Yes.
politicians from from us becoming a republic? We have seen where Barbados made a decision, and from making the decision to completing the process took months. Jamaica is still Jamaica is still not there yet. You know, decades
Yes.
later after after getting independence. So
Of
and of course, I hope, Silburn, just to add this on to plant the
yes.
seed. I hope you will look at um, national heroes as another topic in the
Yes. Yes.
future. Why is it that Bob Marley is not a national hero?
Well, Kevin will say why is Dr. Kevin Brown not a national hero? Yeah.
Well, I am not afraid to say I don't qualify. I don't, as much as I love Jamaica and I've tried to help the country, I don't think I have been as
But
impactful as
that is
Bob
still
Marley.
subjective at the same time, Kevin.
Well, you're very kind, Silver. You're very kind.
Okay. Well, it's very important. We'll bring in Doctor. Let me just bring her right in because she keeps saying I'm saying doctor. Why do I keep saying doctor,
You
professor?
you can just call me Rosalie, no problem at all. Makes it very easy. Rosalie is good.
Because when I was speaking to Rosemary earlier, I kept saying doctor, doctor. But I
She's a doctor, by the way,
Yeah,
so you're
well,
not far off, but then she stepped up a bit above it as well.
well,
yeah,
well,
for
well,
these conversations, I'm Rosalie. That's
yes,
fine.
fantastic, Rosalie. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for joining today, and I don't want to take up too much time because this is such a very important topic that Jamaicans nationally and internationally need to be partakers of. And like myself, at the I'm listening and wanting to be a part of the process because it's very important that the diaspora and Jamaicans be involved with it. So I'd ask you to go ahead and so tell us about this whole project because you're in this FUI Jamaica, FUI Republic.
You know, this initiative came about with our collective conversation about the need for Jamaicans to have a say in our future. It's a core idea that is at the heart of what we do as advocates. You know, many of us are doing a range of things tackling the day-to-day issues that Jamaicans face. The challenges, whether it's crime, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it is, the educational system that's producing, youngsters not prepared for the work. When we confronted these issues, we recognized they're all rooted in our past. It's rooted in a system was never set up for us. I like to think about it as a house that was built for a few, right? And it was very clear in the past, that the house was really only built for the slave masters. It was never built. It was never intended to house all of us. And we've come all the way to independence, and we really thought that things would change and we'd begin to build this house that would accommodate all of us. But 61 years later, almost, right? We're almost 61. We still don't have a house that accommodates us. We still have rules that are founded in that old colonial arrangement. Dr. Brown just mentioned, a final court of appeal in England. So these kinds of arrangements need to change. And we think it is time that we have this serious conversation among our people about what it will take for us to build this house that truly represents the will of the people of Jamaica and represents their interests. And I think that's the conversation about a republic.
So this is where we are talking about moving further now. We're moving from the 1962. We're moving from present, but we're into this new fold. But before we go any further, what are you drinking? It's talking sip. Kevin, what are you drinking? It's talking sip. What's that, Kevin?
This is water.
That's what. Okay, so you have Crystal Punch, and Kevin have a cup there, which it's like those movies, people just drinking things, right? You don't know if anything is in the cup, Kevin. Oh, I think you're muted, Kevin. No problem. You're muted. You're having silent water. No problem.
All right. I'm having a cup of tea. I've been in Britain so long now that when I first came to Britain, I was very reluctant to drink tea because I didn't want it to become a habit, But now, unfortunately, having been here so long, I've taken up the tea drinking culture. So
yes. Thank you, Professor Rosalie. The minister recently sort of set the stage in a way. A recent press conference yesterday set the stage, but I want you to set the stage from 1995 at the same time.
So what happened in 1995 was that there was a commission, Constitutional Reform Commission, that was set up. And it was set up to do some major changes to the Constitution. In fact, it was characterized as Jamaicanizing the Constitution. That's important because at the press conference, the minister said, what that means quite simply is that our Constitution will be passed by our Parliament as opposed to what happened in 62 when it was essentially signed off on by the executives in Britain, right? So in that context, that's important. We absolutely need a constitution that is authorized, if you like, by our representatives in Parliament. But we think we must do much more than that. We're talking about moving to a republic where the people are sovereign. We think it's not enough to simply move the king as head of state. We really need to create a framework in which the people of Jamaica have a say. We have a say in building that house that we all want to live in, changing the rules, redefining the rules in our interests. And I think that's the conversation. We've seen many countries before us, the latest being Barbados, that have moved the king, moved the monarch as head of state, and declared a republic. But not much has changed. What we should remember is that in our 62 Independence Constitution, the power of the monarchy was handed over in Section 63 of our Constitution to the executive. The power was shifted in the hands of the Prime Minister, in the executive, in cabinet. And what happens, we all know, is that when issues come to Parliament, it is the executive voice that dominates, not the
Yes.
voice of the people. Remember, we elect our representatives to speak for us in Parliament. But when they speak, we tend to hear partisan positions,
Mm.
and we tend to hear the positions of the ruling government. We don't hear bipartisan positions that
Yes.
are, when we think about the roads, I mean, just that alone,
Yes.
and crime, that's not a partisan issue. So why are we not hearing these issues
Mm.
presented in a way and decisions taken that cut across these party
Mm.
lines?
I'm
So
gonna
we have
break.
a
Yeah.
fundamental problem.
Yeah. I'm gonna let Kevin come in, but just as you mentioned about operating from a partisan approach, there's this thing called, and it is still existing, right, Kevin? Vision 2030. Vision 2030, which was something which was existing for working together collectively. And I always say every time there's a general election, there's nothing about Vision 2030, which was something which was supposed to be this national growth plan. As far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't even have any policies. You should just have, you should just be enacting things, enacting things. And therefore, what we're having now, we're having the same sort of situation that could exist again, whereby it is operating from a political perspective. And you rightly said this, and I bring Kevin, the people voice needs to be very strong and very loud and profound, if anything. Kevin, you can come in quickly before we go back to Dr. Rosalie.
Yeah, no, thank you, Silburn. Absolutely. We wanna, when you look at the history of Jamaica, it's a country that has a tragic history, but also one that shows that as a people we have fought for the freedoms we have today. And it's really unfortunate that having achieved emancipation from slavery and so-called independence from Britain in 1962, that some 4 or 5 decades later, we're still in the situation where the head of state for Jamaica is the King of Britain. It's almost unbelievable just saying it just now, because again, as I said, when you look at the history of the country, you'd have thought that by 1962 we would have been really keen to decolonize Jamaica in every sense of the word. But what has happened really is that I think our political leaders have captured our apparent freedoms and independence, and so have in effect carried on with some of the legacies of colonization. So look at our education system. So right now we're talking about constitutional reform, but what about how do we reform our education system? When will we stop teaching the theory of discovery? When will we stop telling Jamaicans that Christopher Columbus discovered this Jamaica, and start telling them about African history before
Mm.
Europeans and African civilizations, and giving them a different narrative that will let them know that they
Mm.
were a people that contributed to global
At
civilization
present,
and
yeah.
development? Right? When will we start teaching that in our curriculums? So there's the reforming of the education system. There's the decolonizing of our laws, right? There's a decolonization of our parliamentarian practices, which I guess will come through our constitutional reform, maybe, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done that I think our political leaders have disrupted as it relates to our journey
Mm.
towards freedom.
Is
Because for many of us, at least for me, this doesn't look like freedom. And I say this many times to a lot of people, Professor Hamilton, that if this was America, if Jamaica was America, would an American accept a foreigner
mm.
as their head of state? And I know that everyone in Jamaica said, "No, man, America, no,
Mm.
son, no American accept
Mm.
that." But the weird thing is that Jamaican will say, "No, but maybe we not ready yet. Maybe we need to hang on to the king a bit more." So
Yeah.
we almost see ourselves, Professor Hamilton, as
Well,
children.
it's good.
So,
Yeah.
so what is the psyche that's driving that, where we see ourselves almost childlike? Like, no, maybe we need to hang on to England a bit, hang on to the king a bit more. We're not ready
Well,
yet. Let's focus on the
it's
economy. We're not ready.
it's good. It's good to bring up
Mm,
that point there, and I'm gonna bring back Professor on that, and also to ask Professor how will our organization and what she's chair of will promote Jamaicans to really galvanize, to get this galvanized around. Professor, over to you.
At the center of our approach is
Mm,
to say to Jamaicans, wake up. You have a voice. We
mm,
need your voice. This we cannot get an effective republic unless the Jamaican people recognize their
mm.
role as citizens. We have a responsibility. If we're building a democracy, that's what it's about. That you can't build a democracy, you can't
Yeah.
build a republic without the voice of the Jamaican people. So Jamaicans must now stop, pause, reflect that we cannot continue what we've done for 60 years. We've elected our representatives, we've hold our breath, hoping that they'll
Mm,
do the right thing. And then we
mm.
exhale every election, get disappointed, and we vote them out. That's
Yeah.
typical, or we don't bother
Yeah.
to vote, right?
Yes.
Those are the two things we tend to do, right?
We're
It's
exercising our vote at the same time by not voting.
well,
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know about that, but bottom line
That's
is
what,
we've expressed a view, right? We've
yeah.
expressed a view, and we know. I mean, we've done polls and studies
Mm,
and suggest that a lot of people not voting because they don't see a difference.
yes.
And they're frustrated in either side. But we've moved from 87% voter turnout in 1980 to 37% in the last election.
Mm,
Now, if we keep that trend going, one of the things the minister pointed out is that we have to have a referendum. A
yes.
referendum needs the voice of the Jamaican people. So if people don't bother to turn up, then what will we get? We'll get whoever feels motivated or paid or
Yes.
to turn up. Because that's what we've been seeing, that people go because there's some incentive to go to vote. And the rest of us are now quarreling among ourselves, being frustrated about what we have. Well, that's not good enough. And we're
Mm,
saying to Jamaicans, listen, step up to the plate. Let's be clear that your voice can be heard, that
yes.
your voice, that you want your voice heard. Let's start there. And so this is our a Free Republic campaign is a
Mm,
citizen participation campaign. And basically we're saying by the very name, a Free Republic, it belongs to us and we must shape it in our interests. And therefore, we're asking Jamaicans really have a conversation. Let's talk about
mm,
it. If you think that we need to move in this direction and you want to have a say in
mm.
building that house, right? In shaping the rules that guide how we live in that house, then let's start. Let's start with your own knowledge and understanding. You've put it up
Mm,
on the screen. We say
yes.
let's start there. Don't wait for discussions like this
Yes.
to be the only thing that you do in that learning process. Start by your own reading. There's a lot of information online, right? So just start there. And then you bring the conversation, you come to the conversation with some views, with your own understanding of what you've read or lack of understanding. If you're not clear, come to these forums and ask questions
Mm,
as you try to understand. I mean,
yes.
there's some basic things. What is a constitution? Do we know what that is? Well, Google it if you don't know what
Mm,
constitutions are, and understand that these are important rules that guide how we coexist in a society. It's important to define the ways in which we relate to the people we want to represent us,
yes.
and more. So it fundamentally, very importantly, speaks to the rights and freedoms. Now, if you
Yes.
want to live in a free society, where you can speak freely, and you can move freely, etc. Those are in our constitution, and if we're not careful, they can get eroded.
Thank
I
you.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining. Those on YouTube, those on Facebook, and the bit on uh, Instagram, which is just really to go over to YouTube and Facebook. I have with myself Professor Rosalie Hamilton, Chair, Advocates Network Jamaica, Founding Director, Institute of Law and Economic, and Dr. Kevin Brown, a UK North Representative, Global Jamaica Diaspora Council. And the whole discussion is about Jamaica ready to be a republic, the power to the people, and also most importantly, is the fact that We're on a roll. Now, there's something which is crawling across the screen, ladies and gentlemen, and Dr. Rosalie mentioned it earlier. Jamaicans at home and abroad, let's talk about the nation we want to create as we move away from our colonial ties with Britain. You know, Dr. Rosalie, colonial ties with Britain. It seems like this is an umbilical cord, as Kevin also mentioned, which is, it is so tight, isn't it? Are we, and Kevin, you can come in at some point. Are we going to break this whole thing now? Because, as I said earlier, all they got to do sometimes is show William and Harry to Jamaica and everybody forget everything. Or are we going to break? Because this is about inspiration, isn't it? You got to inspire people to see something. There's got to be leadership from an angle so people can see something to say, we can do this.
Yes. Well, let me start there by
Yes,
talking about inspirations. My
yeah.
inspirations are Marcus Garvey, Queen Nanny,
Mm,
Paul Bogle. Our national heroes, they fought and died for our freedom. And their efforts was to create a different society, a society in which a few are not the only beneficiaries. A society in which freedom was real. It's not simply being thrown off the land, at the end of emancipation, and you have to fend for yourself. We're still fending for ourselves.
mm,
60 years later, 20% of the Jamaican population is living on squatting lands and communities. The landlessness issue, squatting community is a problem. The beach access, imagine our beaches.
yes.
And our prime minister made it very clear that we have a right, we ought to have a right to our beaches. But the reality on the ground is that beach access is restricted and limited. It's been privatized to the extent that 90% of our beaches we have no access to.
Mm,
Now, the issue becomes not so much what others do, but what do we do? What kind of Jamaica do we want in the future? And it is when we begin to ask those questions and we look at ourselves for inspiration. I am inspired by the fact that at the turn of this, during the independence era, there was no such thing as a reggae music.
mm.
We created that. We made up a music. The world has never seen or heard of reggae music.
Fui.
And we took that to the world. Bob
Mm,
Marley and others took it to the world, uncompromising, and said, this is who we are. This is, importantly, this is what we're fighting for. Freedom, equal rights and justice, right? And so that's what inspires me. That's what I think we need to be inspired by. Ourselves, who we are, our greatness, our capacity to fight against the odds, and our capacity to be great. And I think if Jamaicans just reflect a little on who we are, forget the criminals. That's a minority of our society. They are the ones that are, making a lot of noise. But the majority of us have the ingredients of a Marcus Garvey, a Queen Nanny, Bob Marley. That's who we are. We are inventive, we are creative people. No stop with. We know how to turn with hand and make fashion.
yeah.
We know what we have to do to survive and thrive. And your reality in Britain and in the US and in the diaspora speaks volumes. You rise. You're leading institutions. People in these societies are looking up to you. That's who we are. That's what I'm inspired by.
Kevin, that's powerful, powerful, Professor. And ladies and gentlemen, there are lots of comments which are coming. We may come back to them, but I'm going to put them up at the same time. Kevin, the inspirational factor, because that is going to be something which is crucial, isn't it? How do we inspire the people, the mass?
Yes, well, it's going to be absolutely important. In fact, this referendum will live or die by the education process that's wrapped around it, right? Because it could be that you go through a process where, when it comes to the referendum, the way people vote is uninformed and uneducated, right? So we there's a whole education piece that has to happen here. And I think that's going to be the big challenge for civil society organizations like Professor Hamilton's Full Republic campaign, because that's where we're going to have to try and educate ordinary Jamaicans why it's important to have this constitutional reform in the first place, and the deeper impact that it will have on the future of the country, because it's going to lay out our governance framework going forward. So there's a whole educational aspect there that needs to be tackled. And I'm glad to see that you have people like Professor Hamilton and her colleagues setting up civil society institutions to try and take that forward. And I hope more of such organizations emerge. And I would even encourage members of the diaspora to also support these initiatives as well. But what I want to go back to is the key point that Professor Hamilton spoke about, which is that we already have examples of great Jamaicans, Marcus Garvey being one of the most notable ones for me anyway, that has shown us a framework, a philosophy of what freedom could look like. Marcus Garvey spoke about what Black empowerment could look like, what Black unity could look like. And for him, by the way, Black unity was not just about Jamaicans, but it went beyond the shores of Jamaica, and it was more a universal perspective in terms of us as Africans and what that could look like if we could unite globally, right? So the blueprint has been laid out over by Marcus Garvey. So here's the question. How are we educating Jamaicans about Marcus Garvey? Well, when I went through the education system in Jamaica many years ago, Marcus Garvey was just a blip in the curriculum. I knew he was a national hero, and I knew about a paragraph or two about what he achieved. And that was it. And once I left primary school,
That was
nothing, even though I went to university in Jamaica, right? That was it in terms of Marcus Garvey and his impact. I had to leave Jamaica to really understand what Marcus Garvey had achieved in his lifetime and the philosophy and opinions that he presented to us. And so why aren't we teaching this in schools? Right? Why didn't I learn? Why wasn't that imbued in the curriculum? Because in this country, in Britain, where I reside, that's what they do. Their leaders are sort of implanted in the curriculum. And so people come out knowing about what their leaders achieved, what they stood for, etc. It kind of defines who you are as British, because the education system sort of is built around that. But in Jamaica, it's a slightly different narrative. And so people like Marcus Garvey, although recognized, his philosophies are not sort of reinforced in how we educate ourselves. And I think that's part of the problem. That, why is it, for example, in 2023, Jamaicans are still bleaching their skin, men and women? Why do we have a certain level of inferiority complex? Our leaders have failed. They have failed to decolonize the minds of Jamaicans. And the rationale behind that, I don't know. And that lack of decolonizing our minds is the greatest risk to this constitutional process. Because a lot of Jamaicans perhaps will misunderstand what it means. Because all it will take, Silbert and Professor Hamilton, is for politicians to start saying, oh, well, a higher priority here is the economy. Don't worry too much about this constitutional thing, and it will be kicked down the road. Even though we have a committee in place, it will be kicked down the road. We will perpetually trying to become a republic, because politicians will keep saying, oh, well, let's focus on the economy and minimize the importance of constitutional reform and decolonizing our minds and really looking at what freedom is. We are afraid, Professor Hamilton, I have to say, we are afraid, it seems, to leave the plantation, but we must leave the plantation.
Yeah. I want to bring, thank you for that, Kevin, very eloquently put. It's not coming up very big, but you can actually speak on it, Professor. And it's regarding the Fury Republic campaign, because this is a campaign which is going to be very crucial. Kevin spoke on it, reaching the mass, you reaching the mass, but it talks about a citizen participation in shaping our Jamaican Republic. How are you going to go about it, and how can we partake in that process?
All right. So this letter, what the letter does was, just to suggest that as a network,
Yes.
we think that the move to become a republic must put the sovereignty in the hands of the Jamaican people.
Right.
Ultimately, it must improve their standards of living. So the point that Kevin was making about, their bread and butter economic issues more important, this is directly linked to that. And I want to just make that point very quickly.
Yes.
When we include the voices of the Jamaican people in critical decisions,
Yes.
communities throughout Jamaica, we can help to shape the economy. Remember, young people are at the forefront of the new technologies that exist. They want access to resources,
Yes.
to whether financial resources or otherwise. If they're around the table and can make and shape decisions, then we can shape an economy that reflects our interests. That's very, very important. And so part of our push is for participatory budgeting, where Jamaicans sit around the table, we agree on a pool of funds that we help to shape, and that those decisions, both economic and social decisions, are coming directly from us. That's a form of direct democracy that we've never seen in our country.
Can I just ask, when you say sit around the table, which table would they be sitting around?
Again, it could be any table. we define the table in our community.
Yeah.
We have, for example, in the municipality arrangements in the new legislation, opportunities for us to influence those decisions. Jamaicans are not aware of some of those opportunities, but wherever we sit is immaterial. It's the capacity to make that decision that matters. And so we want to strengthen those rules, including constitutional arrangement that says the Jamaican people is sovereign, right? That we need a particular clause or it must be embedded in the preamble. Remember, the Americans have "we the people." That's how they start the Constitution. Right now, we have a Constitution that makes no reference to the people.
And you're right, because anytime if President Bush is going to bomb up somewhere or somebody's going to bomb up somewhere, they always say, "We, the American people, we resolve." They always use that. "We, the American people, we resolve."
Absolutely.
Whether they're going to go wrong or right. Once they say resolve, that's it.
There you go. And as long as we're making these decisions through our representatives, we have to ensure that our representatives have the power and their voice is not thwarted by the executive. Now, and the executive represents a handful of people, right? The majority of us are represented through. So there's another conversation there. But to come back to the campaign quickly, what we want, we start by framing the issue there. This is not simply about removing the king. We want to reiterate that because we will move the king, declare we have a republic, and the problems that Jamaicans see every day and feel every day remains. So we need to, and let me also make this point that it's not a destination. We don't do, one thing or the other, and then we become a republic and all these changes take place. It doesn't work that way. It's the same thing as a democracy. The democracy is an ideal. It's not a destination. And the Americans, after many hundreds of years, are recognizing how fragile a democracy is. And you have to fight for it. People have to actively fight for it. So having said that, we're saying to Jamaicans, look, we're at this moment where your voice matters. And we ask you to reflect on a couple of things, right? The status of our constitution. We now have a committee. Are you going to make your voice heard? Do you want to make your voice heard? This is a question we pose. Because if you think that the Constitution is so complex, it's only lawyers, whatever, then you would feel you have nothing to say. But if you know what a Constitution means and how much it is about your rights and your freedoms and how you want to shape a government in your interests, then we think you should have a say. We want to remind Jamaicans that we have power right now in our constitutional arrangement concentrated in the hands of the executive. We think that our representatives must have much more of a say. And so we have to think again about that relationship between our executive and the legislature. We also are making the point that we can't simply do what we've done for 60 years, vote representatives in office, and then sit back and really expect them to work magic. We have to engage them. There are representatives in our parliament today who want to hear your voice. They want to effectively represent you. But you can't then say, well, I never vote you in, or whatever reason, you stay away. You have to engage. And if you don't know who your representative is, go find
Yeah.
out and write a letter and so on. We also have tools. Part of our network is the Jamaica Accountability Meter portal.
Mhm.
And this is an online mechanism in which you can write a letter with a click of a button. You can send a letter directly to your MP. So we have these tools in place to make it easy for our citizens to get involved. So we're reminding them of that. And then we talk about just the history of the colonial arrangement, the fact that we have a king that's not prepared to apologize to us. Think about it, Jamaicans. You have a king in which he knows, he says he's still learning. So, we're glad that he's learning.
Yes. He's
And I'm
fighting with
glad
his pen. He's fighting with his pen. Sorry.
well, he's now made arrangements for the research to come out about the direct connection of the monarchy to the institution of slavery and to the trafficking of enslaved of Africans. Right now, to that extent, you know that this thing is happening. Apologize. Let's start there. Let's start with an apology. And let's begin a process of reparatory justice. That's what we're asking our head of state to do. We have a head of state where if the head of state visits Jamaica tomorrow, taxpayers' money is going to be spent on that visit.
Yeah.
Is this what we want? Jamaicans, wake up. This is what is happening. We have an arrangement in which we are the only country in which the king is head of state, in which we need a visa to go to Britain, to our highest court. If we want justice, we need a visa.
Yes.
And Jamaicans don't know this. If you're listening, the king's representative in Jamaica, our governor general, also needs a visa.
He needs a visa.
Right. So, do we want to perpetuate that? So having raised these issues in our letter of invitation, we ask Jamaicans, listen, just tell us, give us 4 answers. 4 answers.
Like Kevin
One.
is crying.
I'm just blown away by when I'm reminded of the facts behind
Yes.
the king being our head of state and the lack of advantage that it presents to us.
Absolutely.
So
and
there's just
Kevin,
nothing.
and Kevin, some people say, oh, we must be losing something. People ask me, well, what are we leaving? Let's make sure we don't lose anything. Well, we have to ask ourselves, what are we gaining?
Someone tonight said to me when I mentioned watch your show, he said, are we ready for that? Are we ready for that? We've got so much problems. Are we ready for that? And that is something which is going around a lot. Are we ready for that? And Professor, when I listen to you eloquently speaking, someone might say, that sounds nice, like a pipe dream to a certain extent. Will it happen? It's a reality. The 14 persons who are part of the committee, how much are they in tune with the voices of the people in order to have this level of deliberation to achieve an end result? Even though, as you rightly said, removing the king is not the end result. Being a republic is not the end result. It's a process still to an ultimate. But do these persons reflect a cross section of the people of Jamaica to say that we've got some people there working on our behalf?
Before I answer that, I have to speak to the pipe dream, because what we're talking about is a much easier grasp than enslaved Africans during the institution of slavery dreaming about freedom. Voices like ours now, back then, would lead to certain death. That's the reality. That was a dream, because nowhere in their existence could they even conceive of the possibility of being free in their lifetime. But they fought. So I'm making this point that these dreams can become reality. It may have taken 300 plus years, but it is a reality today that we're no longer being ruled directly by Britain. That's the reality today. We still have remnants and we need to deal with that. But the reality today is that our future is in the hands of our people.
Yes.
And we need to ferret out the best of our people, encourage them to be part of the representative government that we have, and let's put them in office such that they can represent our will. And as long as we perpetuate the status quo, we will defer that dream of freedom. So let me come back to your question.
Yes.
So we have a set of individuals who now are leading this charge. And in fact, the minister made it very clear that their role is to advise the government with respect to what to do. Now, in my mind, there is no perfect set of representatives we can ever find. In fact, if you think about it, the best way we think about our representatives is through the electoral process, right? That's the framework in which we have representatives. Every other process is a selection of people that we put. And these individuals we put to quote unquote represent youth or represent the voice of, the agricultural sector or the churches or what have you, are individuals and organizations that are chosen.
Yes.
There are many others that could speak ably on behalf of groups, but they're not there. So my view is, let's start with what we have, because we could nitpick forever and we'll never end up with a conversation. What is more important than the people who we put that were nominated? There is a mechanism to hear our voice. So I would have been very happy if the first announcement is, we see your voice as so important, Jamaica, that here is the mechanism from day one in which we want to hear from you. And having said that, we say, here is a team now we're going to put in place who will ferret out, work with you, and guide us in terms of how to make sense from all of the information we'll get from our population. I would have been much more comfortable with that because it would have signaled to me that the priority is in the hands of the people. And we start there. To date, up to yesterday with the press conference, I am not clear as a Jamaican what is the mechanism through which my voice will be heard. I'm not clear. I hear it will be through subcommittees, but what's the mechanism? Am I to write a letter? Will there be hearings in Parliament where we can speak? Do we go through our MPs? Do our members of Parliament have a say in representing our voice on this matter? I mean, these are questions we have to ask. So my dissatisfaction has to do with the fact that the arrangement so far does not have the Jamaican people front and center.
Okay.
And, we're hearing that we'll get involved, and I trust that the minister will hold her promise and that there will be mechanisms put in place. We await those, and we will definitely make sure that our voice is heard, and the Jamaicans that we've encouraged to be part of this campaign, and others who are, even if they're not part of our campaign, but they understand the message and say, yes, we will get involved.
Someone said we should be very concerned when we hear everyone on the group agreeing. But before Kevin come in, let me see if we can hear this.
Extremely pleased to engage with the media this afternoon to provide an update.
Can we hear? Yes.
To the people of Jamaica and to everyone.
It's a bit low, Silburn, but I can hear it.
The historic Constitutional Reform Committee, established to provide expert guidance and oversight to the government and people of Jamaica during the constitutional reform process that we are now in.
Let me move that one because that's not the one I wanted. I wanted this one. Let me see if we can hear this
National
one.
Reform Committee was actually established on March 1, but we had our first meeting on March 22 when the Prime Minister announced the composition of the committee. Since then, as Roxine pointed out, the committee has been meeting.
Can I just ask? Can you hear? You can hear, yes?
Yes, yes. It's low, but I can hear it.
And we have been deliberating on the matters to be put to the people for their consideration, what we call recommendations by consensus. I have said repeatedly in other fora that the work being done is being done in phases. And this first phase, phase 1, is focusing on the matters for which a referendum will be required. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the first time that the people of Jamaica will vote to pass a law.
Okay. As you can hear what she's saying, right? Truth. The people. She keeps saying the people. So therefore, Professor, Pee Jamaican, your project now is to ensure that you challenge them. You're going to be like a hawk, or
Yes,
not a dove,
absolutely.
a hawk, not a dove, a hawk into this whole thing, and to really challenge the process to ensure that the voice of the people is reckoned with. Yes.
Absolutely. We now ease up. And that's our theme. It's important because remember, minister is leading a ministry that was set up a year ago.
Mm.
After a year, we've pretty much just heard about the establishment of a committee. We've lost a year effectively. And so we started when we didn't see much effort with respect to public education. We said, you know what? Let's start. We have a responsibility. And in fact, our very first session, the minister joined us and supported the effort. We were hoping very soon thereafter we would have other efforts on the part of the government and others in this public education. We did a number of online campaigns. We wrapped up that first phase of our campaign last month. Now we're taking a second phase, and this phase now is really about not just talking conceptually about where we're going, and that's kind of what we did, but to say, no, now it's time for action. Now we need to get you involved. So we ask and we're encouraging Jamaicans at home and abroad to start the conversation, pretty much what you're doing. So I really applaud you, Silvan, for this conversation and this opportunity to speak, because this is the kind of conversation we want every Jamaican to have among friends, family, and just ask these 4 questions. Do you want to be involved in changing the Constitution? And if the answer is yes, how? Because we still are not clear how our voices will be heard in this process. And if you don't want to, let's hear why not. Because we want to hear why you don't think your voice should be heard. The
Yes.
second question is, what kind of republic do you want? What, the response I tend to hear is, we don't know what a republic is. Well, do we know what a democracy is? Because these are similar ideas, these are ideals. So do a little research and understand what countries across the world have been struggling. For us in Jamaica, the meaning of a republic, in my mind, is that elusive dream that we've had since the institution of slavery, which is that we create a house that represents all of us, that encompass all of us. That's how I think about it in very simple terms. A republic is this house that all of us choose to build, that will represent our interests, that accommodates us all and not just a few. Our Jamaican house was never built for the majority of us. And I think once we understand that, then the question is, who will build that house for all of us? And if we've seen that our representatives who we've elected over the past 60 years have been perpetuating that old house, and the house are popped down, right? Plenty of us don't. Many of us have had to leave because we don't have enough space in that house. That's the
Yeah.
story of the diaspora,
Yeah. and and
right?
and as you're saying, because it's a very topical issue, and lots of people are commenting there. And let me know when you're ready we can answer some of the questions from persons there as well. I just bring on someone on Instagram as well. What they said, our people are too uneducated at this time, sadly. You know, if I know,
They
on
said that at the beginning of independence, by the way.
they said at the beginning of
Yeah,
independence.
yes, yes. But it is it's an interesting point that does have some merit, because as I said earlier, one of the challenges that Professor Hamilton would have is that education piece. How do you educate Jamaicans about governance in Jamaica and why this constitutional reform process is so important? But if I could just go back on a couple of points there, the People's Republic, Professor Hamilton, and it's a worthy ideal that we should strive for. But clearly, the government has already indicated that that is going to be a challenge, because the process itself
Mm,
seems to neglect the people from the outset. You have this high level committee, which is majority lawyers, majority, some of them lawyers who are politicians, are still politicians, one youth rep, one foreigner, this Canadian constitutional lawyer,
mm,
right? A former military man. It's a very eclectic mix, but it also a very narrow group of people in terms of their background, experience, and interests. So how could we have done it differently? Well, there are other examples out there. For example, Chile, when Chile attempted to reform their constitution recently, they formed a People's Assembly, right? It was a massive undertaking, but they included a wide cross section of society,
yeah.
right? People who were not lawyers, Silburn,
Mm,
not constitution experts, just ordinary citizens, most of them in the past marginalized, by the way, who were able to sit around a table. And you know what they did? They came up with a progressive constitution, perhaps too progressive, because when they went to referendum, it didn't pass.
mm,
But nonetheless, there was an attempt, a valiant attempt to include people.
yes.
Why is it that such a process didn't appeal to the Jamaican politicians? Why is it that they've gone back to what they've always done, which is to just focus on them? Because that's what I see in the
Mm,
committee. I just see them. I see lawyers, I see politicians. So I think the big challenge will be how to overcome that. And Professor Hamilton is right. We are yet to hear of a process of how Jamaicans will be able to make submissions to that committee.
yes.
No doubt, I assume that people will write in, because normally the whole process of lawmaking in Jamaica does involve some level of consultation. So I'm sure other civil society organizations will put in their views. But how do you, and this is the critical question, how do you get the ordinary citizen engaged? And I think this is where Professor Hamilton and her team has their work cut out for them.
Yeah.
How do you get schools to have these debates?
Yes.
Get communities to have these debates? The corner boys. How do you get the corner boys to have these debates?
Yes.
How do you get churches to have these debates? And what was really encouraging was when I saw the church already sounding off on the inclusion of this Canadian constitutional lawyer and
Yeah.
professor, albeit because they were focusing more on his sort of liberal
Thinking. Yeah.
views on LGBTQ
Mm,
issues. But nonetheless, the church got involved. And I hope the
mm,
church will continue to get involved in the more deeper governance questions around the constitution, not just the whole, the liberal aspects. So I think there's a whole conversation to be had there, and I hope the government will create a framework for people to feed into it. The other thing I want to point out very quickly is the diaspora. Where's the
mm,
diaspora in this conversation? We're not represented on the committee, right? And we're in all the utterances from the minister. The diaspora is not mentioned, and this goes back to a bigger problem I have with how Jamaica treats its diaspora. Jamaica is happy to take the economic benefits of its diaspora. Send us your money, thank you very much, but you will have no political agency, right? So Jamaicans have no formal route. Jamaicans overseas have no formal route in terms of supporting policy development in Jamaica, right? No Jamaican overseas is coming to take over Jamaica. But what we're saying is at the very least, we should have some opportunity to contribute to the development of Jamaica beyond sending remittances, beyond investing in the country. We should have some opportunity, like other Jamaicans, to participate in the political process. And that could be framed however you choose to. But at the moment, we're completely locked out. And you're going through a constitutional reform cycle where we don't even have a seat at the table. And it's wrong. And it's wrong on many levels. Because if Jamaica is going to be a progressive, if Jamaica is going to be a progressive democracy in the future, Professor Hamilton, but let me tell you something and point it out very clearly. 80%, over 80% of Jamaicans who pursue tertiary education in Jamaica leave. Right? So your intelligentsia, if I could use that term loosely, is overseas. Right? Your intelligentsia is overseas. Amongst the many other Jamaicans who are overseas who are supporting the country. And if Jamaica was really thinking, how do we move Jamaica to the next level? Then it's very clear to me, right, that you have to engage your diaspora. You have to engage their brain, their professional experience, and the many skill sets that they've gained, right, as a collaborative approach. No, we're not saying the diaspora should come in and tell Jamaica what to do and vice versa. We're saying, how do you create a framework that you can really feed from your diaspora beyond remittances?
Let me bring in,
to the next level. And that is not even a conversation that we're having properly at the moment. And never mind constitutional reform, because then you might go into the very controversial area of diaspora voting, dare I say.
Well,
right?
That's another show by itself right there from 2004.
But the diaspora needs a seat at the table beyond just this remittance argument. I think we need to move beyond that for sure.
Thanks, Dr. Kevin. Dr. Rosalie, diaspora at the table. Even though you have more to say,
I want to come back though to a point he made about the churches, and I do want to say that the churches made their voice heard. They're now at the table, right? A seat was given. This was what was announced recently. Now, the Jamaica Council of Churches has formally agreed to collaborate with our network in coordinating and hosting some of these group meetings. So I want to make that point that the churches are also, and it's a very important step because, there's this discussion about church and state and so on. But I think the role of the church is important because it begins to frame the issue outside of the political kind of, divisive approach. So they are going to be part of it. And that's now with respect to the diaspora, I agree with Kevin. I mean, we can't continue to see our diaspora simply through economic lens. And it's important, however, that the minister did make the point about eligibility in Parliament and that there was some agreement to date. The agreement that she's listed so far included the agreement that people who sit in Parliament must be citizens of Jamaica. Now, it raises the questions about dual citizens. Dual citizenship, right? And she didn't seem very definitive on that, but she did say that the details of that will be worked out. It suggested to me that that's a room. I can't speak for the minister, but it suggested to me that that's a framing of saying if you have dual citizen, you would be welcome to be part of the Parliament of Jamaica. And I think that certainly is a move in the right direction. Now, other issues of voting and so on, all of these things have to be worked out. But importantly, I think you get to that issue of representation when we begin to open up the space with respect to having your voice heard. You see, remember, the diaspora need to be careful not to fall into the trap that we're all in. We go through a process, we elect our representative, but when the representative seeks to speak on our behalf, their voice is thwarted and dominated by the voice of the executive. So you would have won the battle, but you'd have lost the war, because in the final analysis, you want to have your voice heard. And the question is, what is the framework for that? And I think that's what we have to work out together. There are many people in the society. The disabled community want their voices heard. The indigenous population want their voices heard. There are many Jamaicans who don't even think that they are descendants of the indigenous people in Jamaica today. They're there. They want to have their voices heard, right? Many people want their voices heard. And the best mechanism we have for that is the electoral process, the parliamentary process in which we vote and we have representatives. Now, we may want to think of enlarging that and bring more representatives in our parliament through the Senate, where we elect our senators rather than appoint. And in that case, there are more representatives and more opportunities for us to have our voices heard. And I think when we begin to think and frame the issues that in this way, these issues about who is on a committee now and so on become pales. Let's keep our eyes on the prize and what is at the table right now, what I think is a critical issue with respect to establishing sovereignty for the Jamaican people is the extent to which we have a legal, constitutional, and institutional framework in which the Jamaican people can have their voices heard. And it's not dominated by the executive in Parliament.
There's something which was, thank you. There's something which was very important with what the minister said, is that they have had a few meetings and these are some of the agreed recommendations and the way forward. And when I heard that, it was like it's a committee that they are the ones who are running the show, and we agreed the way. So they're going for the next phase now. Is there going to be a camera that is showing them discussing it and say, hang on a second, stop, hold, or they're going to agree? Because the key word is agree. Once Anthony Hilton agree and when Malahoo Fort agree, it's like it's set the stage and they move forward. Is that what it is?
Excellent question. Excellent point. Because the question now becomes, now that you've agreed, now that everybody on the committee has agreed to these 3 or 4 points that she announced.
Yes.
What if the rest of the Jamaican people don't agree? Then what? Can we change it? Those are the issues. How will our voice be heard? And already there is a conversation about the extent to which you perpetuate executive dominance by having a nomination of the president by the prime minister in consultation with the opposition and ratified in parliament. Now, what you're doing is perpetuating the same way we've made decisions. It is top down. Our prime minister makes the decision. The consultations are just consultations and
we have consultation. I always say we have consultation
because we know these consultations. The opposition has absolutely no power to turn around the view of the prime minister, right? And so that's just a process we're going through. So it's more of the same. Now, is this what we want?
Somebody said this. Idea of Jamaica said the minister want this thing to go ahead without much challenge, and I will agree with that point, because when you listen to that press conference, she kept saying, and the press, I want you to work with us. And the press, you guys need to be, working with us to a certain point. It's like it's kindly, in a way, like steering the ship to say, work with us in a way. And it's like, we don't want this challenge. We don't want this. We don't want no trouble. We don't want no trouble. That's just my pickup. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to try to defend the minister, but I must say, I think that she's correct in saying that the media has an important role to play, shaping opinion one way or the other.
Yes.
And I think that is so important. I think yourself, as someone in the media, all media has access to the public in the ways most of us as individuals don't. And I think let's just think through that, because as long as, and we don't have, let me remind Jamaicans and our listeners that Jamaica has been a proud member of the top 5 countries in the world, top 10 countries in the world with respect to press freedom. We led the hemisphere, I think a few years ago, number 1, right? So we have a healthy press freedom, and we want to maintain that. And therefore, I think an appeal to the press ought to be an appeal to hear all voices and to
Yeah.
have all voices contend.
All
And
voices.
and I think we, to the extent that we have access to the media to make our views heard, great. Let's be clear, in this conversation, all views will not win. You know, I
Yes.
think the most consistent, the most principled, the most valid, the most what should I say, ought
Yeah.
to be carried. And I say ought to because it may not. But I think at this point, what is important is voices that consistently say the same thing. And we're saying it in different ways. Even the government is saying it. We have to make the Jamaican voice. We have to hear the voice of the Jamaican people. How we hear that voice matters, and you've put your finger on the table where you've said, okay, the committee has agreed. What if the Jamaican people, as best as we can discern, disagree? Then what? So we have to work that out.
Yeah.
And I encourage the government, and I've told, they've said it, they're listening, and they're listening to this, and I hope they are, and to say that we all are in this thing together. This is not something that is going to affect only the people in government. It will
Yes.
affect all of us. And so we have to find a way to make the compromises and to agree. But I want to just finish our last questions, just because just to tell our listeners that 2 other questions we talked about. Do you want to have a say in the Constitution? Tell us what kind of republic? But what role and responsibility do you want? It's a very important question. Do you want to actively be building that house, or do you want to, for example, sit back and delegate your role to somebody else? And that's fine. Both can and ought to be incorporated. That's a direct democracy and an indirect democracy, right?
Yes.
We have our representatives speak for us, fine. But what role do we want? How do we want to get involved in making our budget? That's the participatory budgeting conversation. So we want Jamaicans to think about that. How do we shape this republic that goes beyond moving the king as head of state? And then lastly, the question for the referendum: do you want to continue with a king, a foreigner, as our head of state? And just those 4 questions, we ask our listeners, have the conversation, send in your answers to us. You can email us at advocatesnet@gmail.com, or you can, go on Facebook and, send us your answers. But once we have it, we want to make that public. We will be sending a document to the Prime Minister, to the committee, and saying, these are the Jamaicans who have been part of the conversation. We don't need your names and details.
Yes.
We just want to know that you are part of a conversation. You've given us the information via email, and we will make, as best we can, your voice heard.
And just to follow up on what Professor said, the number and the email addresses and the Twitter, they're all running down there, so you can actually reach out. Definitely on that point. Somebody had said a message that came through. Well, they're just asking. People are asking if the revision to the Constitution has commenced as yet. That is 1, and 2. Are there any remit of the Constitution amendment? Is it just going to stick towards removing the king as head and moving towards a republic, or are there going to be other changes in the Constitution that these guys will have the opportunity to, like a thief in the back door? Sorry.
Well, that's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. All we know so far is what was announced at the press conference yesterday, where the minister gave us an update. She talked about the focus, is on matters in phase one, and there are several phases. Phase
Yes.
one, the focus is on matters relating to the referendum, and this has to do with altering the constitution with respect to the changes required in the referendum in order to remove the king as head of state. So much of the work is going to be linked to that with respect to the constitutional changes, as I understand it, and also building on the work that was done in 1995. So we
Yeah.
had a constitutional reform committee that laid a number of recommendations, most of which we've not done anything with, some of which we did. We did change our Charter of Rights, and so there's some changes made there. And then she also pointed to these consensus that's taken place. So the actual change
Yeah.
of the Constitution has not yet started.
Mm-hmm.
It's the agreement on the approach to the changes, and what is on the table is that these changes in phase one will be linked to the removal of the king of head of state and the issues that are required for a referendum.
Kevin.
Yeah, so there's a lot to consider there in terms of constitutional reform. That much is clear to me, and I think just a couple other things to sort of add to the conversation in terms of what type of governance framework should emerge. That's going to be a difficult one to answer, because we can see, Professor, that the politicians are steering us towards more of the same. They're saying that, oh, well, we'll have a symbolic president, a ceremonial president, and by the way, we'll select he or she, right? So it's pretty much more of the same, at least from the little statements that have been made and the political anglings that have emerged. And is that the right path for Jamaica? Is there a different way? Now, of course, when people look at the democratic frameworks, there are several examples out there, right? We have the American system of an executive president. We have the Westminster system, which Jamaica tries to practice. And we have other versions that have emerged, right? For example, in Germany, it's more of a proportional government system where no one party dominates and you have to form coalitions and so on. So in terms of the practicalities of how democracy will emerge after this review, I think there's a big debate to be had around that. And my worry, Professor, is that we will tend to probably want to cut and paste and copy, and there might be a lack of inventiveness. There might be a lack of wanting to accept the Jamaican way, right? What's to stop us from creating the Jamaican way of practicing democracy based on a number of factors? One, the history of the country. Two, our cultural practices and norms, right? Why couldn't we create a system that we think, you know what, this could actually work for us, or not? So, I'm hoping that there will be room not just to look to America and other countries and say, hey, let's just copy them, but maybe just look at what could work for us. The other issue as well, Professor, is let's not stop there. The minister said that this is going to be in phases. Well, hey, here's an important phase. Let's decolonize our laws, right? Let's remove words like crown land. So even the use of language in parliament. I mean, if you look, Silburn, at the parliamentary practices and the things, the rituals that parliamentarians and senators have to do at the start of a session, I mean, you'd really have to scratch yourself and think, are we really independent? Did 1962 really happen? Or did I just wake up and emerge and this is a murky dream, right? Because we haven't even started, I would argue, Professor, in decolonizing our laws. How many laws are there that need to be repealed, that are mired in the colonial history of the country that our politicians have never bothered to touch?
Well, we'll have to go to Hansard to find that out.
So there is so much, Professor, in terms of decolonization. There is so much, and here's the disappointing thing for me: This is the country that produced Marcus Garvey, Michael
Absolutely.
Manley,
Absolutely.
Dudley Thompson, all these people who were internationalists, who other countries looked up to,
Emulate.
right?
Yes.
And then and yet still, you know, you look at several countries, for example, in the continent of Africa, that have gone way ahead of us. You know, immediately after independence, knew better than us to get rid of the monarchy and to have their own republic. Who knew better than us and have done so, changed their constitution and have attempted to decolonize. You know,
Yes.
and here is Jamaica, who has produced these world famous international advocates, and yet still as a country, but we are where we are. Why? Because here's the reality. Just like how Jamaica rejected Marcus Garvey, Professor, let's be honest, right? Jamaica rejected Marcus Garvey, right? It's the same challenge we face in terms of rejecting decolonizing the country in the way that it should be done. And it's the challenge that we have in achieving real freedom. Freedom
And
does not have a price.
Yes.
We
Yes.
just need to
absolutely.
get it.
I come back to the point. We
Yes.
haven't changed the house. The house, we are perpetuating the same structure that we've inherited. We've tweaked it. We've patched it. You know, there's a little leak, we patch it up, but we still have the whole house, right? And therefore, we are doing exactly what happened. You're correct. With respect to Marcus Garvey, these ideas are being rejected through the same system, the same hierarchy that exists in the society. But I want to come back to a very important point you made about the creation of the outcomes that we want. We have to invent it. For the American listeners, they are very familiar with the idea of we the people in order to.
Yes.
There was an objective for the constitutional arrangement they put in place. They wanted to perfect a union in order to perfect their union. So their constitution made sense in that context. They tried to achieve something. You are absolutely right, Dr. Brown, that we have to ask ourselves as Jamaicans, what are we trying to perfect? What are we trying to achieve? And I suggest that it is the freedom, self-determination, and humanity that we lost during this entire period of slavery and colonization. And if we put that at the center of what we're doing, then we begin to see we must indeed create a republic in our interests.
So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we are the vanguard of Jamaica. All of us, led by Professor Hamilton. We've got to be like Hawkeyes. You know what I mean? With the whole thing. I want to bring in some questions here as much as possible. Very important point. Can you read that, Professor? That's why I rebutted the sentiment that I should not say prospect of us being a republic. I say prospect because I want to hear the pros and cons and pass them on. This is a part of the education program. How would you answer that with the pros and cons?
The pros and cons of becoming a republic?
Yeah, well, I think that's what Sandy Bradshaw is saying. They want to understand. I think it is when we're talking earlier about the positives of the being a republic or not. As you mentioned something about with having King Charles still or having no King Charles. You know, can this be something which is before the people? You know, to say this is how it's going to be, the pros and the cons.
Well, again, the King Charles, moving the king as head of state is just one component. So if we think about that change already, we're beginning to see the shape of that. And that's pretty much the same form that it takes in other countries where you have a president. What is important is that you now shape the powers of the presidents in your interest. You shape those powers that reflects what you're trying to achieve. So if we want to have greater voice, then we ask the president, for example, to maybe referee in places where we don't have a voice, or we may want our presidents to tackle some of the pressing issues that face us, for example, crime. Whatever it is, but we put in the hands of our constitution or in some framework, provisions, if you like, rules, responsibility that we give our head of state. So that's one thing. We talked also about our final court. Do we continue to go to the British for our final say
Yes.
with respect to issues having to do with our rights and freedoms.
Yes.
There is an alternative arrangement in place, and so we can put our cases to the Caribbean Court of
Court of
Justice.
Justice.
Has
Yeah.
been established, and we now need to make that our final court of appeal. And there are a number of other issues that we now need to put in place. I've hinted throughout the discussion that we have to look again at the executive and legislative arrangement. Do we want to continue an arrangement in which our executive dominates the legislature? Do we want to continue the way in which we have our parliamentary committees? Do we want to have a say through these committees, have regular hearings where our legislators can hear directly from the people, and that we can join them in having our voices heard in these kinds of arrangements? These are discussions that we need to have. And
Yes.
so I think that it is in that context, the pros and cons ought perhaps to be discussed at the level of the specific issues you're talking about. And
Yes.
so if it's the king, then yes, there are discussions about pros and cons. I am clearly on the pro side. I have searched around for these cons, and all of the cons that I have found with respect to why we should stay, I can't credibly even talk about them because I see no merit to them.
Yes.
So I would ask those who are wanting to retain the king to make that case. And they're there. And let me also make a last point on that matter.
Yes.
One person who was on a video who was adamant that he wants to keep the king, and in fact saw himself as a monarchist, right? And why? Well, because he said he doesn't think that if you move the king, it's enough. He says, boy, Jamaica have a lot of problem, and we have to, the king, moving the king is not going to solve anything. I agree with him. I agree with him. The only difference is his conclusion. He concluded he wants to stay with the king, and I said, let's get rid of the king because the king is neither here nor there. Right?
Exactly.
So that's it. So let's have the conversations, because the very people who want to keep the king, when they engage the conversation, they'll realize, hey, we're talking the same language.
So that's why I mentioned the conversation is so crucial and very important.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in Mark.
Just
I want to say hi. Let me just say hi to Mark. Mark Cameron, how are you, Mark?
Mark, well, yeah, complain. Very, very interesting conversation, and you have the professor is the person that we need to be talking about the Republic. She's been putting up the fight, on behalf of us. So much respect for that.
Can I just bring in Kevin and then back to Mark? Kevin, you're onto something.
I wanted just to respond to that, because I can guarantee, Professor, that will be the most popular question asked. But it's a lazy question, with all due respect, because this isn't transactional. It's like if we were born a few hundred years ago, Professor, you and I would be slaves, and would we be asking ourselves, I wonder what's the pro and con of being a slave, right? Because one would think that automatically freedom is everything, right? And sometimes as Jamaicans, we try to approach things in this transactional approach. Because of the challenges we face economically, we start to think, okay, well, if I leave, if we get rid of the king, will that disrupt any benefits we're getting from Britain? Well, who told you we're getting benefits from Britain now anyway?
And let me quickly say, Kevin, that some of the benefits we get from other countries, which is aid. Many countries give us aid. And if we move away from the king, it doesn't mean the aid will stop either.
Yeah, that's another thing as well, yeah.
Right.
Okay, fantastic.
Sorry, Kevin, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Kevin, you finish?
No, all I'm saying is that we have to push back on that question, because that's a lazy question.
Yes.
And the reality is Silbert, that this is a question of do Jamaicans want to be free?
Yeah.
Or do we still see ourselves as children, right? Waiting for our parents to say, by the way, you are now mature, you can leave the house. Why can't we take a step forward? And what really saddens me, Silburn, is that Jamaicans are some of the proudest people you will ever meet on this planet. But when it comes on to these issues, there is a blockage. Even the most intellectual of Jamaican, there is a blockage in terms of, boy, you know, I go back to the analogy. This timid approach to leaving the plantation.
Yes.
You know, they're just afraid. Boy, I mean, I want to leave Massa. Is Massa all right? You know, how Massa gonna feel if we leave the plantation? That mentality, even in the brightest of Jamaicans, you will find it. And that's what we need to fix.
So Massa's still around. Mark,
Massa is still there.
Mark Cameron.
By the way, I'm not. Massa has become a very toxic thing because of the utterances of our finance minister.
Well, Mark is here. Mark, we said Massa. I would say Mark. Oh, sorry, Mark. Not Mark. No, Massa. Mark. Mark. Mark, how are you, Mark?
Well, I'm good, but let me say this here, right? Let me say this here, right? When Jamaica was being run by the legislative, we had a better run Jamaica. I'm not advocating for the Queen or the King, us to be under the King, but I'm saying to you that the
Mark,
people,
when you say legislative council, can I just make sure I understand you? Are you referring to when we were colonized?
Yes.
Before 1962?
Absolutely.
Okay, right. Go ahead.
No, if it's not a popular statement, but they acted on behalf of the Queen. Jamaica belonged to the Queen, so they had to do the work. Now, when we transitioned to our so-called independence, I do not believe that Jamaica, the people that ran our country, actually believed we owned the country. So many of them, you know, the corruption and everything else, everything that ails us today, have come in. They talk about pros and cons of the Republic. I wrote a poem, and I'll read the first part of the poem because it's a pretty sizable poem. It says, hear this, enough big talk about symbols of the bell and the fist. And the popular talk is now about Jamaica becoming a republic. But the wrong one won't make things better. It can make you sick. So, to my point, the republic has to be a republic that works in the best interest of all Jamaicans, not a few who decide to call it a republic. They can call anything a republic, but what kind of republic is it? And is the government the true guardian of our assets, our future? I don't think a government that's only has 24% of the Jamaican vote should have that say in who has the or drives the conversation about what kind of republic Jamaica is going to be. That is not going to happen. And if it comes up where they're going to talk about a referendum based on a few people they picked to structure their republic, we're not going to be a part of that. And Jamaicans have to stand against that, because we're not represented right now by the people that are in power. They're a minority government. And like I said to you before when I started this conversation, Professor Rosalie, she's been there way before these guys. She's been talking about it. She's been engaging, as she rightfully should, with all stakeholders in Jamaica about what kind of republic we want. As a matter of fact, if my memory serves me correctly, she's presently having those kinds of discussions coming up. So for the government to move forward, structuring this so-called republic, no, that's not right, and we're not going to stand for that.
Professor, the voices are coming out.
Yeah, well, I want to come back to that pro and con, because I saw a follow-up statement that we're talking about not just the king. So the two concepts in this republic idea. It's the king. You're talking about a state without a monarch, right? That's one idea. But the other idea, and they both go hand in hand, is the idea of making Jamaicans sovereign. So I would then rephrase the question: what are the pros and cons of making Jamaica sovereign, making the people of Jamaica sovereign? And a way to think about it, quite frankly, is to think about, do we perpetuate the norm, the status quo, today, where Jamaican people are not sovereign, right? Where the structures and the way we organizing is in the interest of a few. Jamaica is not set up to accommodate the majority of the Jamaican people. So that's the and there are some, let me just say some people may want to keep that because we know it. And that's more comfortable. And we're afraid to go into new areas that we're not sure about. Again, Kevin's point about let's be bold enough to invent. Some people may be afraid of that. So there is a downside for, going into the unknown if you're timid. And I would say the arguments in support of the Republic are arguments that are aligned with the idea that it is better for our democracy, it's better for the social and economic outcomes of our country when the Jamaican people become sovereign, when the voices of the Jamaican people are heard. And I want to just make the point in two ways. So we've been talking about the constitutional legal ways in which we change the laws, we reorganize our parliamentary arrangement to strengthen the voice of our people in governance. So that's one way. But the other way that I hinted at earlier is as important, because those are the issues that concern the average Jamaican. How does this republic lift my standard of living? And it's a very important and relevant question, because right now, Jamaica is below the world average with respect to standard of living. And if we were to get to even close to that average, the legitimate question is how? And I suggest that when you create a framework in which the people can have a say, they have a say with respect to how income is earned, the industries that they create. Think about it. Suppose the early reggae musicians had a say in how to shape funding and shape a budget that could support and strengthen the work that the pioneering work that they were doing. And the legislators were bold enough to back them. Where would Jamaica be today? Let me give you another example. Where would Jamaica be today if back in the 70s, when Jamaicans like Professor Henry Lowe and Errol Morrison and these other professionals who were pioneering cannabis, ganja research, right? And they were pointing to the medicinal use of ganja. Of course, Peter Tosh spoke about it. What if we had legislators and a decision-making process in which their voices could be heard and supported and backed by a budget? Where would Jamaica be today? We would be leading the world in the ganja industry. So I from my perspective, as an economist, I am very clear that there are economic benefits to increasing and improving the voice, having Jamaicans help to shape policy that are linked to the innovative and creative things that they're doing. To succeed in the modern world, we have to be competitive. And our challenge in making our way in the modern world is the extent to which we can produce competitive goods and services that can engage the global market, that can enable us to earn foreign dollars, that can enable us to reduce our balance of payments problems, and then generate the kinds of surplus that can fix our social problems. Now, that to me is very much directly linked to this idea of making Jamaican sovereign, giving us a voice, giving us the power to shape our economic policy. Right now, we're listening to economic pronouncements from our foreign our Minister of Finance, who tells us, for example, that they're going to give priority to $1 billion investments coming into Jamaica. And none of us are asking, well, what is the investment coming in to do? Is it going to strengthen our music industry? Is it going to strengthen the areas that we do well on already? Is it any old investment? Like, it doesn't matter? Those are questions. So let's have a discussion about it. Bring the voices of the Jamaican people so that we can agree with the minister that these $1 billion investments will be given priority, will be given the priority that our taxpayers' dollars are shaping. And if we have a say, we can say to the minister, well, minister, I would love that $1 billion to go in the education system, right? Or I'd love that $1 billion to strengthen our music industry. That seems as if that, it floundering a little, right? Strengthen our sports complex, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's eloquently put, Professor. And Mark Taylor just actually put the nail on his head by saying Jamaica is a democracy. Again, how does a republicanism better affect the decisions made by its elected leaders? And he just made that point a while ago. The money that comes in, is it the right? Where does the money come from? What is it for, as well? We got a few minutes to go, and
Silbert, if I could just quickly comment on that. Okay, so the first thing people should realize is that this call for us to become a republic is not a panacea. It's not going to fix all of Jamaica's problems. So that's the first thing. So if we're looking for something that's a panacea, a silver bullet, this is not it.
Yeah.
Right. And as Professor said earlier, all democracies are a perception. They are a work in progress. And even in countries that have sort of built their history and narrative on democracy are finding that even today it's a challenge just to keep that narrative together. So this is not a panacea. The question is actually just more, it's absolutely very fundamental. And to me anyway, do we want to be free or not? And look, and let us not get into a conversation that, well, but at the end of the day, freedom must be money in our pockets. Because as I said, we are just fortunate to have been born after 1962. When Mark talks about the colonial administration being better, he's being very romantic, right? Because at the end of the day, what was the reality of African Jamaicans at the time, Mark? They were landless peasants. Landless peasants. That's why today we still have a squatter problem. That doesn't sound like a better situation to the one we have now in Jamaica, where there's a housing boom, right? And where people have more access to housing and land. Today's situation sounds better to me.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
so I think we're too romantic about
hold on,
this colonial narrative.
Hold on.
No one can tell me, Mark. I'll let you respond in a minute. No one can tell me, Mark. Not one person could convince me that it was better to be a slave because somehow the slave master was very organized and structured. So, okay, right, so clearly we should remain slaves. Everybody wanted freedom, and freedom we should have. And the point is very simple. We're saying that we're on the road to journey. Part of that road to journey is freeing ourselves of a foreign health state, freeing ourselves of a foreign final court of appeal, and every other thing that's required to decolonize our governance framework.
Okay,
that's the journey we're on.
Right.
Okay, I was very specific. I said Jamaica was a better run country. I never said it was better for Jamaicans. I was speaking specifically with government, how the government was being run. Things were done efficiently and much better. Now, as far as Jamaicans are concerned, obviously we are not living the way that we ought to, but we need to be careful about how, when we talk about governance, okay? Because you can have, as far as I'm concerned, I believe that a non-partisan democracy is the best route for Jamaica, because there'll be no PNP or GLP side or no UIC or Up Jamaica. It'll be Jamaicans representing in each parish their constituencies. So these are the conversations we're talking about going towards a republic. Now, there's talk about a parliamentary style republic. We have looked on how that works, and it has not worked for the benefit of Jamaica. Jamaica is more divided now than it ever was before. You're talking about this housing boom. Who's building these homes? I mean, these are all returning residents coming back. The housing boom that you're talking about with on the government side, They're actually building houses on agricultural land. That is not gonna empower our people. Jamaicans need to realize that farming is our source, our only sustainable source of foreign exchange, as well as tourism. These so-called investments by these people coming in. Are we talking about a new plantation like the call center you're talking about? That doesn't help Jamaicans. That helps those who own the call centers.
Okay.
As
So
a matter of
Mark,
fact, I'm doing a painting right now.
yes.
That shows the transition from sugarcane production into call centers and to service help for these major hotels that degrade our environment and pay the people wages they can't live on. So who
Okay.
will benefit from these investments?
So therefore, Mark, those are some of the conversations will have to be had with the world shaping of this new constitution and the republic, which is cut out for Professor Hamilton. And as we move forward, thanks for that, Mark. We're going to wrap up now. Professor, before you go, can you sort of set out any last statement that you like to make? But before I do that, I just want to actually pay homage to people asking questions or just saying things. You make a lot of sense, Mr. Cameron. That's what someone said right there. Donna Matty says, Mark Cameron is a very dangerous statement. It puts in mind of people that we need to retain the crown. The danger is twinning the crown without good government. Mark, you don't have to respond. I'm just reading some comments here. The Advocates Network Jamaica encourage all on this call to have discussions with their network about a free republic. Please motivate all in your network to start talking as we move forward. The what should I say? The contact will be below. And how will this move affect reparations? Dr. Hamilton, that is a big question that's going to come up because people are still talking about reparations as well. How, as a matter of fact, how will this affect reparations? It's a quick one.
Well, actually, I think it's an excellent move and discussion in preparation for any reparations, funding, institutional arrangement, what have you. Just think about it.
Yes.
If tomorrow $1 trillion was agreed and to come into Jamaica, where would it end up? Remember, 70% of the Jamaicans believe that our representatives are corrupt.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very thoughtful about reparations, as a lump sum of funding, or and to move away from that idea and to think about reparations as a process.
We're still trying to find bolt money. Sorry.
I'm saying so I think if we think about reparations in the way that the CARICOM has framed it as building institutions that can repair the damage, then we're talking about the same thing, because we are talking about a republic in which these institutions are reformed and they are better fit for purpose. And the purpose is to ensure freedom, self-determination, and humanity in the Jamaican people that we've lost for decades.
Yeah. Professor, if you in wrapping up now, I let you have one of the last word. What's your final statement to us for the show and for the people in the diaspora and those who are listening? What do you have to say last? Of course, this is just a start of major conversations, of course.
Your voice matters. The power of the people is greater than the people in power. And I think if you think about those words, you recognize that all that have been said puts the future of Jamaica in your hands. It's what you choose to do. If you continue to do what we've done for 60 years, then I think we'll have more of the same. I think if we choose to act differently, if enough of us choose to act differently, we will get better outcomes. And I encourage Jamaicans to be inspired by our greats, all of the individuals, the Jamaicans that have gone in uncharted territories. You know, I think about Miss Lou. I think about, of course, we've talked about Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley and the greats. They've all made us proud internationally because they were bold enough to say, we are who we are. And I think if we push in that direction, Be bold enough to recognize that we can create a democracy, a republic that the world has never seen, that ultimately addresses our concerns and takes us to where we want to go. It will not be done overnight. It will take generations, but we have to be on that path. And I think I've framed it simply as, let's build the house. Let's rebuild the house. Let's stop the patching not working. You know, when we had emancipation, there were 3 options: stay on the plantation, leave the plantation and go overseas, or the third one, create self-reliant, independent options for yourself. That's what the musicians did. That's what Marcus Garvey told us to do. And that's what I'm suggesting we do. We create a path in which we can be self-reliant. We rely on, we're bold enough, self-confident enough in our own capacity to create a future that's in our interest.
Thank you so much, Professor Hamilton, for coming on today and to share with us the way forward with the people, you know, holding the people up, because it is so important that the people's voice can be heard. It is so important that the rafters in Sentan, which they mash up their raft, those voices can come up and be heard. It is so important that the people selling in Kingston, when they mash up their cart and they throw their food all over the place, what their voices can be heard. The nurses, the doctors, and everyone, their voices can be heard. As Kevin said, the diaspora, the voices to be heard. And the sound of Mark, which is saying, why do we need so many MPs when we only have 14 parishes? Right, Mark? Why do we need so many MPs?
Absolutely, and
We need more voices.
to add insult to injury, we're having lawmakers who are lawbreakers. We need lawmakers who uphold the law and the framework of the law, and not act with impunity. That is our biggest problem. We have all kinds of laws and they're not upheld. The judiciary needs to be changed as well as part of the Constitution. Went towards a republic. All those things, as Professor said, need to be addressed collectively, not just change it to a republic. Everything is going to be part of the republic that we have to change. We have the benefit of history, what has worked and what has not worked, and we can be framers of a new republic. And we need to embrace that and run with it and not be afraid.
And finally, Dr. Brown.
Well, thank you, Silburn. It's really been an enlightening conversation. And, you know, what I hope, Silburn, is that this conversation will be an example of conversations to be had where not everyone will be in agreement, but at least the conversation will be constructive. And there will be elements of commonality that we can move forward on, you know, and at the same time being civil and respectful to each other, you know. So I hope this sets the scene for what should be a very interesting journey. But I just want to end really by saying, Silburn, that let us not think that constitutional reform will fix Jamaica in terms of the many challenges we face. However, that is not a reason to reject it.
Yes.
The reason to move forward with this constitutional reform is because we have been on a journey since the first African set foot in Jamaica as an enslaved human being. We've been on a journey for freedom. We mark emancipation, we mark independence each year, but we are not quite there yet. And let us move forward now to get the job done. Let us become a republic, and however that is framed in the future, so be it. Let us move forward with having our final court of appeal closer to home, because we know that we have good and capable judges and legal practitioners who look like me. So we don't need to have a final court of appeal overseas. Right? Let us decolonize our constitution, decolonize our laws, decolonize our education system.
Decolonize our
Let
mind.
us be Jamaicans, proud and free,
Mm.
not just in national anthem or in the pledge, but in reality, on the ground.
Yes.
Right? So I hope everyone will participate in the process because it's very important. And let us see how best through civil societies organizations such as Afua Republic and other groups, how best we can allow ordinary citizens to participate in this process, because it's very important. So I want to thank you, Silburn,
Yeah.
and I hope that the diaspora will also add to the conversation. You've certainly kicked it off
Yes.
here in the UK, Silburn. I hope that diaspora in the US, Canada, and elsewhere will also have similar participatory conversations as well. But I look forward to it. Exciting times. Let us keep the fire to the government, because as Professor pointed out, the process has been very slow. I hope we will see some pace to this
Fantastic.
this journey.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank those on Instagram, those on Facebook, those on YouTube for joining the show, and your questions, of course, which you have put. We have seen them. Couldn't actually go to all of them, but we I've encouraged Professor Hamilton and Rosemary Binder to actually go over them and to look and to maybe even respond to some of the questions that people have asked and people have mentioned. And I want to thank again Professor Rosalie Hamilton. She's a Chair Advocates Network Jamaica, founding director of the Institute of Law and Economy. And also thanks to Dr. Kevin Brown from the UK here. He's supposed to be going to his bed right now. UK North Representative, Global Jamaica Diaspora Council. And Mark R. Cameron, the artist, businessman, Dukuma, everything. He's supposed to be in the States, but he's the only man in Jamaica. Only one of us in Jamaica right now, right, Mark?
Yep.
I was there a couple of weeks ago, so I still have some lingering sunshine.
Okay. And special thanks to Rosemary Binder for organizing this, of course, and Facilities for Better Jamaica. So thank you so much, very much. Thank you, Dr. Rosemary Hamilton, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and we'll keep this up and well. Mark,
we're not easy.
We're not easy.
No, we can't afford to.
All the best. All the best.
All right, take care, guys.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for tonight, and I wish you all the best, and have a good night, and we'll speak again. And of course, we're going to keep the momentum on this particular topic, and my wish and desire, of course, is to have audience with the minister as well, the opposition as well, on this particular topic, just to keep the conversation going more and more and more, so we can all be abreast, and for somehow that Jamaicans, wherever, can feel a part of this whole process and don't feel it is for them, but everyone must feel a part of this process for Jamaica to becoming a republic. It's like a new order, a new day, and we have to definitely be a part of it. So thank you very much. Have a good night and see you next week. Peace out. Boom.